Welcome to season 2. I missed you. How are you? I hope you're doing wonderfully well. I really did miss you. It's nice to be back in this space. I think this is a great way to connect, and I appreciate the reviews and the comments and the feedback. Let me know if you love something, loathe something. This helps shape it so we can be even better, because friends, we are in it for the long haul. So I hope you will join me as we have many guests to share their expertise. Let's do it. I hope you enjoyed our bonus episodes that I shared, where I shared practical application and advice from season 1 guests and related to my current projects in development. Also tips from Tony Howe. Isn't he wonderful? He is a beauty and a gem of a human. Tony Howe talked with us about keeping the business of show business running really well. I am a huge Tony Howe fan, queen of that fan club. I love his email excellence. I love his website. I love his social media courses. If you have the chance to be in his sphere, I highly encourage you to join his programs. He does a great job. So in addition to that, we also had a bonus episode on what I call the critical in-between, which is the space between the heartbeats. It's the time when the bread rises. It's the time between these significant steps in the development of a show. And what do we do during this critical in-between? How do we take care of the show, the people making it, and ourselves? How do we fill that creative well so that we can continue to make and appreciate wonderful works of art? But today, we're teasing out the start of season 2. When I first began producing with an eye towards Broadway, I knew I needed a show or two. And at one point, I had 3 shows I was lead producing. And if you don't write your own musicals, then you have to find one. What is that process like? How do you start? Where do you find a story, the music, and how do you find an author that you really connect with? That, my friends, is the focus of Broadway's Bit by Bit podcast season 2. The musical writers that take us on the glorious and sometimes heart-wrenching journeys that we enjoy on stage. I was recently asked to speak to musicalwriters.com. This is a group that you can find. I hope you look them up. They're terrific. They encourage and equip musical writers. And I was so impressed with these groups of musical writers, with the variety of their projects, their passion, their dedication. So, knowing that we are focusing this episode on writers, well, just made sense. I decided to invite some of them to share their stories with us. My hope is that if you're an investor looking to be part of an incredible journey of developing a new musical, or if you are a producer and you are looking for something you can feel passionate about and looking for the right fit with a playwright, I invite you to listen to these musical writers. In the few minutes I shared with them, we laughed, we talked deeply. I was inspired by their wisdom, and more than once I was moved. I hope you will be too. Here, my friends, is a taste of what we have to offer as we open season 2 of Broadway's Bit by Bit podcast. Listen in. Judy, you are a Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter. Congratulations. What an honor. That's fantastic. And you were nominated for your children's music. I want to hear more. Tell us that story.
Okay. Well, I've done many different kinds of music. Back when I started, I was just a teenager and I thought I was going to be the next Karen Carpenter, but that didn't happen. But I still kept doing music, and I did country music for a while. I moved to Nashville. I did that. But when I had children, I turned to children's music and found that was what I was really good at and loved. So over the years, I recorded 5 children's albums of original children's music, and then a couple of Christmas albums. And it was my last children's album that got nominated for the Grammy. I lived in New Hampshire. It was produced in New Hampshire. I had no name, but when I threw it in the ring, I was a member of the Academy, and I just started sending my music to voters and asking them to listen, because you can't ask for a vote. I said, I know you don't know who I am, but I hope you'll listen to my album. I've got it, it's on the ballot for Best Children's Album. And so when it got nominated, that was huge. And it was validation, because I was 51 at the time. I had been working in music for all intents and purposes my whole life, and always wondered if I had been doing the right thing. you know? And so when I got that nomination, it was validating, but it was also important to me that my children saw that I never gave up on my dream and that I was able to accomplish that. And I had always told them, someday I'm going to get nominated for a Grammy. And when I do, we're all going to go. And we all went, we all walked the red carpet. It was wonderful.
But you did say that although your children's music was what got you your Grammy nomination, that wasn't your biggest hit.
No, my biggest hit is actually a Christmas song. It's called The House on Christmas Street. I had always wanted to do a Christmas album. So after I did my second children's album, I said, I'm going to do a Christmas album for families. And I was writing material for that. And I said to my husband, everywhere we've lived, there's been that house that's over the top decorated for Christmas, but there's no Christmas song about that house. I'm going to write that song. So I did. And I put it on my album. And I said, oh my God, if I ever have a hit, I want it to be this one because it will come back every year. I mean, because think about it. The only time you hear Frank Sinatra or even David Bowie now. Well, you hear more David Bowie, but Karen Carpenter, the only time you hear those people is at Christmas time, right? So I tried, but it's just impossible to get radio airplay when nobody knows who you are. And this was way before the Grammy nomination. But lucky me, I released that album in 1998. In 2006, so 8 years later, my husband was trying to cheer me up and he was Googling names of my songs and stuff. And he found a video of a house somewhere in the Midwest where they synchronized their lights to music. And they were using my song, The House on Christmas Street. They had found it on the internet and that caught on. So Christmas decorators who are big into Christmas decorating made it their anthem because it was the only song. It describes it says 47,000 lights and snowmen on the porch and Santa on the roof and all this stuff. And I have been to decorators' houses where they have each of those elements light up when I sing about it. It's just been amazing. I've gone on 4 cross-country tours where I have sung Christmas music on the lawns and in the driveways of decorators who use my music. So that's my biggest hit. It's got 250,000 views on YouTube. You can see the official video, which was done at a decorator's house. So that song kind of put me on the map. That also leads into how I got into musical theater. Do you want to hear that story? Because that's a real...
I do. And we will also say that we will put the link to that YouTube in the show notes.
Great. Yeah,
but
great.
Yes. So we haven't even talked about how you got into musical theater. So how did you get into musical theater?
It all turns together. It's all part of the same wheel. So I secretly am a huge fan of the horror genre. And I know it's crazy. This children's musician, that's another story. But I love horror. I love to read horror. I love horror movies. So I had a friend from Maine, where I'm from, who was a horror writer, who knew this other horror writer who I was a huge fan of this guy. His name is Joe R. Lansdale. And I found out on Facebook that Joe was making a movie of his horror novella, which is called, get this, Christmas with the Dead. It's a zombie Christmas movie. So I said, oh my God, I have to get a song on this soundtrack. So I went to the website for the movie. It was just starting production. And there was a place on the website where you could write a letter to Santa Claus. So I wrote to Santa, dear Santa, please make my fondest wish come true. I want a song. I'm a Grammy nominated musician and I would love to have a song on the soundtrack. Well, I ended up with 3 songs on the soundtrack. And then at one of the screenings of the movie, Joe, the author, turns to me and says, this is going to be my musical, because he's from Texas. He goes, this is going to be my musical. And I said, well, I assume you're telling me this because you want me to write the music? And he said, yes. So 6 months went by. And he kept sending me emails because he doesn't text. He sends emails. Every email was like one sentence. I'm still thinking about that musical. So I'd be like, okay, great. I'm here when you want me. And then one day, 6 months later, he sends me a message and he says, I'm just writing books and I'm up to my ears in obligations. Do you want to take a crack at adapting it? So I was like, oh my God, I've never written a show in my life. What do I do? I don't even know. But I did what I've always been told you should do. And I said, yes. And then I educated myself. And it took me a year to adapt it and write all the songs. I went down to Texas twice for table reads. And then in 2018, we had a staged reading. I mean, I wrote one of my best songs for that musical. It's called What Would You Want If You Were a Zombie? And we have a zombie Greek chorus that comes out at the end of some of the acts and sings doo-wop. And I just did it all off. I got like that book, The Secret Life of the American Musical. I joined all kinds of websites and I taught myself what to do. During the pandemic, there was an idea that I had way back when my daughter was in middle school. And by this time, she was like 25, 26. And it came from watching her in middle school musicals and middle school plays where there were always more girls involved than there were boys. And they had a lot of girls playing the boy parts. So it was like reverse Shakespeare. And I said, these girls need a musical that has more girl parts than boys. And I had an idea that it should be about a girl who wants to do a job that was not traditionally done by girls when I was a kid. So out of that came the musical Girl on the Moon, which takes place on the night of the moon landing in 1969. And this young teen wants to be an astronaut. So she invites all her friends over for a sleepover to watch the moon landing. And they all have their I Want song. One of the girls wants to be a DJ. Another girl is a folk singer. She wants to be a famous folk singer. And the other girl just wants to be a homemaker. Because it was that time where we were kind of caught between women having careers and women staying home. And in the course of the evening, our hero, Marty, she finds out that there are no girl astronauts in the United States. And the character who wants to be a radio DJ finds out that there are no girl DJs on the air. And so by the end of the show, they decide that if they're going to be able to break these barriers, they've got to stick together and be strong. And that's what Girl on the Moon is about.
Strong girls stick together. When a girl wants to climb, but society won't let her, we'll be there to boost her and help her fight. 'Cause strong girls stick together, and we want rights.
Your first musical was the zombie musical.
Yes.
You wrote, but this is like the first musical of your own idea.
Yes, this is the first musical of my own idea. And Ken Davenport, who I know you know, who is a Tony-winning Broadway producer, I went to one of his weekend events for theater makers, and I asked him what to do about it, that I have this musical and I don't even know how to get started. Do I try to get it through one of the big licensing houses? And he said, give it away for free 3 times. And he said, have you approached the middle school in your town? And I said, no. But you know what? By the end of that seminar, I had contacted the woman who was in charge of musicals in my hometown. Everybody knew me in my hometown because of the children's music, and they had agreed to stage my show. So I had it by the end of that seminar, I was able to go up to him and say, it's going to have its premiere at the middle school in my town. They were rehearsing it when the school closed because of the pandemic.
Oh my
Yes. But with that, we pivoted and we did an online version. So we were able to cast from all over the country. It's not perfect, but it was good for me because it was like the first staged reading. And I was able to see what things need to be cut, what needed to be advanced. And through that, there were 2 other theater companies that watched it on YouTube and wanted to do it. So I gave it to them for free. And so it's had 3 fully staged, well, it's had 1 Zoom production, and then it's had 2 fully staged versions, which went great.
You know that this podcast is dedicated to emerging producers and first-time investors.
Yes.
And you and I have been part of conversations of being a writer and trying to self-produce or self-license or get your work seen. Now, I know that you want the next phase of this show, Girl on the Moon, to happen. But can we acknowledge that you've had 3 stage readings, including a Zoom reading? You made it happen. You made the phone call.
Actually, that's true, because I've had 3 musicals and I've had 3 staged readings. Yes.
And if we talk about how it takes a show, just in this example of Broadway, it takes a show on average 3 to 8 years to get to Broadway, then yes, maybe the timing isn't your exact timing, but it's happening. And those things have legs. This writer is going to thread, right?
Yes. I'm currently rewriting my 3rd musical. I had a dramaturg go over it, and I'm rewriting it, and I'm very happy with the way it's coming out. So that's, So that's
Can you give us a hint of what that is?
Again, another historical musical. It takes place in 1979, and the main character is a music major at a small state university, and she meets a boy. She has music dreams. She wants to be a singer-songwriter like Carole King, and she meets a boy, and she falls for him, and they go out. They end up dating, and she meets his two best friends, and she becomes friends with all of them. And at the end of Act One, she finds out that the three of them are in a love triangle. And the musical is called Every Girl Should Have One. I just changed the name of it as a result of working with the dramaturg, because it's about the lifelong friendships that were formed at that time. Because the boys were all in the closet and they were afraid, and she didn't understand. And so there's a lot of coming together and understanding in that musical, and understanding why the men were in the situation that they were in, why they needed her to sort of be their beard, although we didn't call it that then. And it's basically how, and I've told my daughters their whole lives that they have to have at least one gay man as a best friend. So that's what that musical is about.
So Judy, my wish for you is that we'll have you back on the podcast when you have your first fully staged production.
Yes.
New name, whichever show that you're working on. But maybe before that, you will retire off TikTok. Can we talk about how your songs are on TikTok?
Well, my songs are on TikTok, but not the big push that's something that, I haven't fully explored, but the music is there and stuff is being done with it. There are videos with my music in them that other people are making, but I need to get on the ball and make more videos with TikTok. That is a frontier I haven't fully explored.
I'll tell you what, Judy, after talking with you for even a few minutes, I can see that you are the multi-talented, multi-hyphenated artist that is doing great things and exploring new frontiers, and also like figuring out that you can use a skill set in many different ways, but you are in your essence a marketer. I can feel that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I spent 30 years working as a radio DJ myself and learned a lot about marketing through that. Yes. Well, I have a lot of big ideas.
There's so many people who, marketing is the name of the game for any show or production we're working on. Like, what did you learn at that time that you could share with us?
Oh, well, be positive. Be positive all the time. Never say, you can't miss this. Say, you have to see this. That's the best advice. It's all in the mind, and how you present something. Always be positive. Don't talk about how many people weren't there. Talk about how many people were there. And those are the number one things that I think people don't think about, the language they use, and that's so important. And, the other thing is be friendly to everybody. And that's not just because of who you can use. Just be friendly, because that's what people will remember. They'll remember your personality. If they want to work with you, they'll remember who you are. So just present a pleasant outlook and try to think positive, which isn't always easy for me. It's been a long haul. But being on the radio for 30 years, you can't go on the radio and start complaining, or at least you couldn't when I was on the radio. You had to be positive. There were times that I was crying in the studio over some personal thing, and I would flip that mic switch and just be the happiest radio DJ you ever heard. And so it's it's sort of a little bit of acting, I guess. But, once you do it, it gets easier. Maybe don't be so discouraged, because even though there were times that on my 50th birthday, I was on tour in New Mexico and I didn't have a show that day, and I cried all day because I just said, I always thought when I was young, I was going to be this big pop star, and I just don't know if I've been doing the right thing my whole life. I've dragged my kids all around the country, which turned out to be a good thing. I've never been able to have financial security except for my husband. And then at 51, I got nominated for a Grammy. So that was the validation I needed. But I would tell that young mother, I would say, don't be so discouraged. Just keep on doing what you're doing, and you'll see it will reap benefits, and it won't end. And you'll find all kinds of different roads to take your talents down, and just keep doing it.
Judy, your road hasn't ended. I'm really excited for you. You have to keep in touch with us.
Thank you so much, Megan Ann. I am so happy that you allowed me to come on, even though it wasn't really the theme of your podcast.
Welcome, Wayne and Glenn. We're so glad to have you.
Hey, Megan Ann. We are very excited to be here and to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. So I don't always start at the beginning, but with the two of you, I'd like to start with how you met. Glenn, can you tell us how you met?
I seem to remember it being in the hallway at Marianopolis College. I think it was in the hallway, and I'd seen Wayne before, but we'd never really exchanged words, and we were kind of in the same friend group, but on different peripheries of it. It was a pretty large friend group. We sort of took over like the middle benches in the middle of the hall and every day. And anyways, when Wayne and I got to talking, and Wayne, feel free to correct me on anything because it was a long time ago, not to date ourselves, but I played piano, and we decided to start writing music together, and that sort of manifested as Friday nights every week we would get together, write music, and then at the end of the evening we would have tea with honey in it and milk, listen to Funeral for a Friend from Elton John, and fantasize about a grand future.
Is that how you remember it, Wayne?
Pretty much. I think we discovered our common affinity for music right away. And I'd always been creative, but I hadn't really dabbled too much in songwriting until then. So Glenn and I, Glenn was the first person I had the opportunity to sort of bounce off songwriting with. And we developed just a great friendship then. The next steps for us is we formed a duo, and we did some performances within our school and to our friends, and then ultimately joined some other friends of Glenn into a band in Montreal and played in a major band competition there. So that was a lot of cover songs, but we in that band we wrote a lot of material as well. So for me, that was kind of my introduction to songwriting, and I fell in love with that process right away. And to have a Glenn as a really good friend along the way was fantastic.
At what point, Wayne, did you decide that you wanted to write more than just covers and maybe a musical?
It had been on my mind for a number of years. I love musicals. Why not try and write a musical? And I knew I had the songwriting chops for it because I'd done many, many years and had tons of experience with songwriting. But when it came to writing a book for a musical, I didn't really know where to begin. I'm strong with structure. And hey, that's where Glenn came in.
Glenn, you, in the interim period, also had a career of your own.
Yes.
How did you reconnect? Inferring that you lost connection, how did the reconnection happen?
Well, we actually haven't ever lost connection. We haven't always lived in the same city. And Wayne was here in Vancouver, and I really want to underline, I did not move here to be with Wayne for other reasons.
No.
And it just so happened that we ended up living in the same city again. But we've always been in touch.
Wayne, did you talk to Glenn about writing the book? Was that?
Here's how it played out, Megan. Well, I was very excited. I'm writing a musical. This is awesome, right? And I started out on my own. And when I would talk with any friend about it, they'd be interested. Oh, you're writing a musical? That's really cool. We'd talk about it for 3 or 4 minutes, then move on to the next topic. I was out with Glenn one day, and I'd been 4 or 5 months into the process, and I started the same conversation. Hey, Glenn, I'm writing a musical, and expecting the conversation just to go for like 3 or 4 minutes. We talked about it for 2 hours. Glenn was peppering me with questions about who's this character, how do they relate to that other character, what's the plot line, what happens next. And at the end of that 2 hours, I said, Glenn, we got to write this thing together. And I know with Glenn, his work as a psychiatrist, I knew he would have windows into the character that I couldn't possibly have. And I knew, Glenn, you were dabbling with other novel writing, right? So Glenn had a lot of work on dialogue, right? So I knew he could bring strengths to the project that I didn't have. And I knew with the history we have together, it would just be so much fun. And man, has it been a lot of fun.
I am sure, Glenn, that your work as a psychiatrist helped, even as Wayne describes it, to keep the conversation going, to ask about the characters. Tell us how your work has influenced what you've done as this book writer.
Well, in the work that I work in several different settings, and a lot of the work I do is emergency psychiatry, but also clinics and following people for longer periods of time. And my interest has always been the overlap between biological and psychological symptoms in terms of how they inform suffering. How somebody suffers is often a manifestation of what's going on biologically for them, but also what is their personality style, and then what are their expectations? Like, what is a personality? It's how we see ourselves. It's how we see the world. It's what are our coping strategies? What are our expectations? What are our entitlements? Are there any distortions in there? Are there defense mechanisms? If so, what are they? And do we like people around us? Do we generally dislike people around us? Like all of those things. What is the biological level of anxiety? What is the biological level of mood instability? What's going on in the situations around people? So I've been thinking about that stuff for years, and from the perspective of trying to understand people and help them feel seen, and try to instill some form of hope. So this was, when I started writing, trying to write a novel, which was a good experience. But it sort of prepared me for this, really, if anything. But the whole idea of creating the character from scratch and deciding what the traits are, and then my gut, just based on my experience, sort of tells me, it helps me sort of speculate how they might talk, or what kind, how they might express themselves. But then taking two characters that we've created and having them interact with each other with a certain idea of where the conversation ought to go, which maybe it'll get there, maybe it won't. It just depends on whether the characters will actually allow it to get there without it feeling contrived. And that's really been important to me, because I think that if we get too caught up in that they have to accomplish this by the end of the scene, I think that's a recipe for contrivance, especially if their personalities don't actually fit with the way you feel it ought to go. And so often Wayne and I would have conversations where I would just sort of challenge and say, well, Antonio would not do that. He would not say it like this, and he would not do this, and this is why. And then I would sort of give my psychological analysis of why he couldn't possibly do that. And then Wayne's response would be, well, why don't you say what your usual response is to it?
Okay. Oh, you're right.
So Wayne, did you know it would always be Bound the Musical? Did you know it was always a version of Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost? Was that the genesis?
So it's an interesting beginning, and it's not kind of what you normally would expect or kind of what you want to hear. And that I had this wonderful inspiration of this is kind of what I wanted to write about. I knew I wanted to write a musical that was going to be human and inspiring. That's all I knew, and a comedy. I knew I wanted to have a happy ending, because I'm a glass half full person. So I kind of knew that basic framework. But as far as what to write about, I had no idea. So what I did, I figure, why not steal from the best, Shakespeare? So I looked at all of Shakespeare's plays. I zeroed in on the comedies pretty quickly, just to get a basic outline of the storylines from every single one of Shakespeare's comedies, narrowed it down to a few quickly. And ultimately, I just love the bounce and the flow and the characters within Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost. So I thought, this is something I can work with, right? From a storyline perspective, purely as a vehicle, right? It's not necessarily it's the story I want to tell. It's just a vehicle to share the experiences that I want to share. And I knew I wanted to modernize it. So taking characters from England and France 500 years ago and converting them to the small town of Middleburg now, and a team of Olympic aspiring athletes that make a pledge, forbidding romance. And as soon as they do that, then thrown their way as a team of these very attractive researchers. They want to they're PhD researchers. They want to study them, and there's instant romantic tensions that develop. So
Wayne,
yeah.
Did I hear you say town?
Sorry, it's not a town anymore. They voted to become a country. It's not any ordinary town, an ordinary country.
Country.
Yeah.
A country. Does a country fit into this idea of like this Olympic team? Is that why we shifted from a town to a country? Got it.
Yeah. So there's sort of a maniacal president behind the scenes, right, who's sort of steering everything. And he was the mayor, and he wanted much more prestige for himself. So he convinced everyone to vote in a referendum to turn the town into a country. And then that, for more prestige, he wanted to create his own Olympic team.
Wayne, I can't imagine working with the insight that Glenn has and how that influences your characters. I mean, suddenly your characters, we all know that the hardest part about a musical is writing the book. The music can be reaching and swelling and wonderful, but if it doesn't have a solid book, we're not going to get anywhere. So what a gift to have both talents in this same experience.
In my very younger days, I could have been a patient of Glenn's, right? I grew up myself with great trauma. My mom passed away. She committed suicide when I was very young. My father fell into alcohol and drugs. When I was in my early 20s, actually around the time I knew Glenn, I was a complete mess, right? And I had to go through 2 solid years of intensive therapy and personal growth work to get through that. Whereas Glenn will bring the psychological, psychiatric expertise, I can also bring really the personal experience. So there are 10 characters that each have their own internal conflicts, internal challenges, and go through their own growth. And each of those has a little bit of me in it as well, in terms of the particular traits they have. Like there's one character that has a perfectionist trait. It's very goal focused and can have blinders on as a result. And I can be like that at times, right? There are other characters with high amount of anxiety, and I've certainly gone through through periods with high anxiety, and how to find my own inner confidence to overcome that. And Lewis, one of our characters, does exactly that. He starts with great anxiety, and when he becomes the one that ultimately solves the puzzle with the encouragement of the other athletes around him, he discovers the inner confidence that he already had.
And speaking about anxiety, we have another character with anxiety where it's more subconscious, because he manifests it as compulsive joke telling. That's Dustin. And so I do believe he has anxiety underneath it all, but it's not obvious, not like Lewis. Lewis, it's obvious. He wears anxiety like an overcoat. But Dustin wears it with jokes, and he doesn't seem to take anything seriously. And I think that the jokes actually are a way for him to express things that he could get judged for. But if he says it as a joke, then he can always say it's a repeating line that he has, which after he does a joke, he'll say, "Just kidding." So it's sort of, therefore, even if he said something that was mildly offensive, people on the receiving end of it wouldn't really know how to read it, because it was just a joke after all.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're using the storyline of Love's Labor's Lost again as a vehicle really for these 10 parallel journeys that our characters are going through. We really want to reflect that if you are in tune with the people around you, and if you're willing to be vulnerable, and if you're willing to put in the work, and you're willing to learn from others, that there is a happier life there for everyone.
Can I add something about suffering, which I would argue I'm an expert at?
Please.
Yeah. So I think suffering, it can be argued, connects people on many different ways. One thing is we all suffer at different times in our life experience. Some people suffer throughout. Some people are fortunate or unfortunate enough to live a fair amount of chunk without too much suffering, but then they're less prepared for the suffering when it does come, because we do lose things, and loss is what leads to that experience. But as well, so we all have that in common, but as well, when we've struggled with our own issues with anxiety or mood, and we get through it, then even in my 20s, my self-esteem wasn't that great, and that affected my mood, and that manifested as some degree of anxiety as well. And so I did a lot of personal work as well, and therapy as well. And then meanwhile, I'm working on my career, trying to help other people. And I can say that when I started as a psychiatrist 22 years ago, my confidence wasn't as grounded as I would say it is now, and which is what we all hope for, I think, as we get older. But we don't forget what it's like at different times in our life when our esteem was lower. And so I think when we get through that, it gives us, the experience of change, which is sort of in our bones. And then we can use that to hopefully help other people who we were when we were in our 20s. And so we can, I truly believe that people can improve regardless of what their personalities are like. And having had my own change, as we all have.
Glenn and Wayne, we're talking about suffering and lived experiences and how that connects us. Also change within ourselves as we see it viscerally in the characters on stage, and how trauma informs our experiences. And what impressed me about this piece was the levity, the joy in it. Like it's funny, it's light. Like there's a great juxtaposition here. Now, of course, that gives it great depth, but you started with a comedy. Your comedy is layered with some real issues, but very much in your materials, you talk about how people will leave the theater feeling good. How do we leave the theater, Wayne, after they've seen the show?
It's Shakespeare. It's Shakespeare comedy, so it's going to have a happy ending. And really the way that we, more than anything, sort of evoke that positive feeling and the skip in the step coming out of the theater is through the music. There's the music that I write. It's intended to be very accessible, very catchy. I take great pride in the lyrics as well. They're not predictable, and then there's a lot of craft that goes into them. The most powerful songs in the show they're placed strategically at the very start of the show, at the end of the first act, and then there's a real build up in the last 4 songs of the show. Real emotional build up as we hit all the emotional climaxes. The last two songs particularly really bring in that sense of being bound together, right? And really have that strong inspirational feel. So it's a musical, so that's the way to get those strong feelings of connection, right? Is through the music.
The song that stands out is "Bound to Figure Out." I would love both of your take on that song, why it's important, how it came to be, and why that's the song that we think of when we leave the theater. Wayne, do you want to start, and then maybe we'll get Glenn's editorial on it? Yeah.
So that's the finale, and in essence, the story is done at that point. So it's really it's the song that wraps things up. So the example I like to use is, the finale in Greece, where, how we go together, we're all together. That's the type that's the type of feel that I was after, and that I think that the song delivers at the end of the day. It's a song where it features all 10 members of the cast. So they each have feature vocals, and they're bouncing off each other, and they're basically all reflecting on what they've learned, and that they like said that the bound to figure out, it was inevitable, right? If they put in the work, if they listen to each other, if they learn from each other, then it's inevitable that things are going to work out, and more importantly, we are going to grow, and we're going to grow together.
I'll just add, it's a happy and warm song.
That's what we found. We were bound to figure figure out it's love.
I saw your pictures. You've had a reading, a production of sorts. What do you hope is the next step?
Yeah, so we just finished a cast album, which functioned as an extensive multi-month workshop with actors playing these roles as well. So it had a theatrical workshop elements to it as well. So we're very excited about that. What we need now is audience feedback. To date, we have already had extensive dramaturgical reviews and multiple workshops and many, many rewrites. So the materials are at a point where it's ready now to get in front of an audience. So we're looking to do a staged reading, like a fully cast staged reading of the show. So that's what we're trying to figure out. What's the best way to make that happen. Ideally locally here, but it really could be anywhere. Where we will travel anywhere where we can help make that happen.
Glenn, your hopes for the next steps?
I'm going to go with what Wayne said. It's a really can-do, positive, open, and I think that does describe us. We spent so much time working on this, like years now. I think 7 years we've been writing this for. So yes, it deserves our time and attention and openness, right? I know it. We have to be open to whatever opportunities come. So I'm fairly flexible about that myself.
It's been brick by brick, just sort of building this out, and so this is what's next. The audience feedback.
Well, you're very self-aware in your writing and clearly in your producing and production timeline. If you can work on a project for 7 years, that speaks to the timeliness of it, the timeliness of the themes, of the characters, of the arc of the change. I'm sure potential investors that are listening or potential producers would find that very appealing. Tell us, Wayne, where would we find you? Where do we find you and Glenn and the next a way to connect?
Boundthemusical.com is our website. So that's the best place to go. That's where you can find everything you need to know about the show. And you can reach out to us through that website. Our social media links are available through that website as well. And there are also links out to the cast album. It's on all the major streaming platforms, on Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music and YouTube, etc. So boundthemusical.com. And we would love to chat with any producers out there who are interested in the story that we're telling and the characters that we're sharing and the journeys that we're sharing. So we'd love to see if we can find a win-win there somewhere.
Wonderful. I hope that for you too. I hope you'll keep in touch and tell us as you take that next step, those next journeys. I know, given the tenacity, which I see in both of you and sense that those next steps will happen. And I'm so excited to follow the journey of Bound the Musical. I'm thrilled for you. Congratulations.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ruth, as we get started, I'm so grateful to have you here. Thank you for taking some time. For those who don't know, they might be interested to know that you were invited twice to address the UN roundtables in Geneva, Switzerland. You are a pioneer of interfaith pilgrimages to Egypt, Israel, and Turkey. I thought it was interesting that in 1991 you co-founded the Festival of Freedom, and that that Festival of Freedom was featured on CNN World News in 1994. That's fascinating. Also, congratulations in 2013 for being inducted into the Martin Luther King Advisory Board at Morehouse College in Atlanta. And then congrats on, even just prior to that, Minefields and Miracles, Why God and Allah Need to Talk. How beautiful that book was endorsed by more than 30 religious leaders, including the Dalai Lama. Congratulations, and thanks for spending some time with us.
I'm privileged and honored and looking forward to it because of you and who you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One wouldn't necessarily associate faith or inter-religious dialogues with theater, but it sounds like your journey here hasn't always been the straight shot. Can you talk about how you came to musical theater?
Right. So I'm a fan of musical theater, and I remember as a child when I would have vivid dreams of musicals. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd remember the choreography and the actors and so forth. But maybe many people have that as a result of going to movies. But I pursued a course of first journalism and then filmmaking, and I became a documentary filmmaker, and I did that for almost 30 years. And although I was given piano lessons and played for many years, but it was a hobby, and occasionally I would write a song taking an original melody and just switch the words to make it meaningful for the occasion. So I love doing that. But this happened actually at the end of 2014. I had a walking partner, Gene Rothman, the late Gene Rothman, a dear friend. And he said to me one day, Ruth, I can't walk with you any longer because there's someone who's older than you are that needs me more. Because he had a friend like 10 years older, and he said he needs company. And I said, okay. And then I was suddenly left to my own devices. You know, when you're on a walk with someone, you're talking the whole time usually. And what happened was remarkable. Just one day when I was in my inner space and my mind was quiet and I was just enjoying nature, I suddenly heard words in my head with a melody attached to it. And the very first words were, what if when you awoke, you were wearing a stranger's shoes? What if when you awoke, you shared your enemy's extremist views? What if when you awoke, you think in color, not black and white? What if when you awoke, you could imagine not being right? And I thought, what? Like, where is that from? And then the chorus came out. What if we all could see the beauty of one expanding humanity? And then I thought, wow, this is really what I believe. This is all my work in 30 years. What if we could all see the beauty of one expanding humanity, that it's not over. Humanity is still growing and expanding, and we have to be, just like we learn to use the internet and technology and to communicate in a totally different way, we also have to accommodate ourselves to the changes in the populations of the world, in the mixture of the races,
Sure.
in the understanding of people who have totally different set of beliefs, but at the core really believe the same thing. And that was what my 30 years of interfaith engagement and leadership had taught me. And so suddenly, and I would say miraculously, I call it a cosmic download because I don't have any other explanation for it. I shared that song with friends and they said, well, why did you write it? And I said, I have no idea. And then 30 more songs tumbled out over the next 6 months. I would come home, I would write the songs, type out the words, and I would remember the melodies. And then a friend of mine who's a professional musician, composer, and has his own musical ensemble, I shared the songs with him and his family, and the kids would march around the house singing the songs. And he looked at me and he said, you have a musical there.
I feel like this walking exercise, Ruth, is so releasing for you, which is great for the writers that may have had a similar experience. Would you call this writer's block, where you didn't know what to write? And this idea of this creative well is never closed. Wow, that's so terrific. Everyone who's ever had writer's block needs to tap into that well. How would you recommend doing that?
Well, I'm going to point out to another example. It's not just writing. When President Reagan was at a standstill with Gorbachev, the Russian president, they were at Camp David and they couldn't come to an agreement. And at that particular stalemate, Reagan said to him, why don't we go for a walk? And they went for a walk. And when they came back, they were able to get to the agreement. So I don't think it's just for this creativity. It's not just for writers, composers, artists. I think that when you change your environment, and especially when you go to nature, and when you get quiet and you're not so intent about what you have to do, and you let things take their course. Do you know how many people have told me that when they meditate, they find answers and solutions to problems that they have struggled for months, that it's only when they truly went quiet that the mind worked it out? And I think that's very true for artists. I know most of the artists I know, including choreographers too, they will, if they can't figure something out, they'll get up and they'll start walking and moving in a certain way, and that releases the block. And then they get to a place that sometimes is even better than what they had planned. And that's what I think is so remarkable too, the getting to the better place. But I think we can all do that, whether we're active artists, whether we're doing that part of our life, or whether we are private artists. I mean, we're all artists.
Yes, it's so true. And I appreciate your taking the experience of you as an artist and reflecting it into our overall experience, human being experience of how we get through not just blocks, but how I heard you say that it becomes even better than what we had planned. And I've definitely had those moments of getting quiet, which is hard to do in our world. There's so much news at our fingertips, blaring voices at all times. It's really hard to get quiet, especially as an artist. And I often, fall into the business of the show business side, which can be very busy and loud, if you will. But it really is in the quiet that we can find that inspiration. Let's talk about this musical. Can you talk about the specific songs? Meet Me There, Let's Make Room, We Are the One. Can you talk about how, what your hope is for these songs?
The Meet Me There song, which is now actually we changed the title from Interfaith the Musical to Meet Me There, the Interfaith Musical. It was suggested by so many people when they heard it. They say this should be the title of it, and it feels so appropriate. In the Interfaith community, there is one particular Rumi poem, and Rumi is the Sufi Muslim poet that lived in the many hundreds of years ago, but was beloved by everyone who knew him, and Jews, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Baha'is, they all loved Rumi because he had such a universal quality to his teachings, even though he was a devout Muslim. Anyway, one of the best known poems that we recite often in the Interfaith community is "Beyond all ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." And that's what inspired the song. And the song says just that. This is a place for which we long, a place where we belong.
There's a field out there beyond all right and wrong. There's a field out there of peace for which we long. There's a field out there where you and I belong. Go, meet me there.
So Ruth, you have had some investors along the way, or better said, people that are invested in you. I know you want to give them a shout out, a thanks. As you do, talk to us about how you found these investors, if there's other writers that are listening, or if there's other first-time investors that may not just want to invest in a Broadway show, but start at the very beginning and invest in a person and a project all along the course. How did you come to find these individuals that were so invested in you?
Well, I think they were coming along for the ride because it was so exciting to them that suddenly a woman they knew that had spent her life making films and writing and, traveling interfaith was suddenly writing music. And I remember my sister, who has been one of my greatest supporters and investors as well. She helps me all the time. Leah Abrahams. She, when she heard my first songs, she called me and she said, "Who are you?"
This is your sister.
Who are you? You could have been doing this all your life. It was such a surprise. I mean, it was a surprise to me, but it was a surprise to people closest to me because that was not my genre of expression. You know, that was just not how I wanted to talk to the world. I didn't know I could do it either. That was the other thing. And then there have been people who have, like Chaya Molnar, who has helped me with my website and with my written materials, with my funding letters, because she's a master of marketing. And she told me what people want to hear and what they don't want to hear, and how do you address them when you send out a funding letter. And I've had so many people. Yuval Ron is the musician composer that said to me, "You have a musical." So he's the what will you call him? The granddad of this project. And the Arts Angels Corporation organization recently made a significant donation because they believed in the value of the arts for changing people's minds and hearts. And Gar Jameson, who's one of the people has been following me all the way through, he recently made a challenge to me. He said, "I will give you $5,000 if you raise $10,000. And that upped the ante. And it was so exciting to see what happened, because, and I want to recommend that to people who are fundraising, that if you get someone who issues a challenge, you know, I had to raise twice as much as he was going to give me, but you should see how people responded. And here's one thing that I did learn, because I did do a Indiegogo campaign a few years ago. They said to me that no matter how remarkable your project is, unless it's an invention that's going to earn money, and they can see the money, you know, they can see the till going down, what do you call that? Of the cash register. Unless they can hear the cha-chang of it, they may not invest in it. But when it has to do with an artistic project, the people who are going to invest in you are the ones who know you, who know your soul, who know your dedication, who know why you're doing it. And like you said, they're happy that it's going to be a musical, and that it'll be something that'll be enjoyed by hundreds, thousands, who knows, even, you know, millions of people eventually. But one of my first investors is a minister, a Unitarian minister, who, when she heard the music, she ran down the aisle screaming, "I'm giving $1,000. And I've never done this before in my life, but I so believe in this project. I need to do this." So what moved her? The people in the interfaith community who have been my greatest supporters all understand that we're looking for any means possible to convey these ideas that is not like a sledgehammer where you're preaching, because people do not accept new ideas when they're being preached at. They only accept new ideas when they're being touched in such a way that they can shift a previous idea they had naturally, because they've come to a new understanding.
Ruth, I'm excited for you. I'm excited for this project. I hope that there are people listening that will reach out to you and help you in those next stages. I'm sure you'll find your continuing group of supporters. Where can people find you?
The best place is to go to interfaiththemusical.com, where they can read more about the musical and hear some of the songs and order the songs if they want, either CDs or streaming. And or just write to interfaiththemusical@gmail.com and just write me a note, let me know. And if I can help anybody who is an aspiring playwright or musical theater artist, I'd be happy to, because we need to bring everybody along with us. It's a difficult road. You know, I've been working on this since 2014. And like you said, Megan Ann, when you taught us recently, you said most people, 7 to 10 years easily before it gets on the stage. And even Lin-Manuel, who had already produced and directed In the Heights, he was a known director, and he had his own posse of people, creative people, of choreographers and directors and people that he knew. I don't have that team yet, but it took him 7 years to get to the stage with Hamilton. So you have to take the long view, and you have to take the bird's eye view, and then you have to be able to go down to the immediate micro of what you're doing and to go shift back and forth between that. But as long as you believe in your project and you have people that are saying to you, we need to hear this, we want to see this on the stage, you need perseverance, and you need to make time to be quiet to hear the still small voice.
We will take those two pieces of advice to live by: perseverance and pause. How about that?
Yes.
It's beautiful, Ruth. And you are inspiring me in my process, in the work, to take the time to be persistent and to pause, and also to share your stories and your struggles, to be real as a human, to connect to other humans in the best way that our humanity can, because our world needs more of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this privilege. And I'll see you on Broadway.